The Vraxian First Fleet arrived at New Pyongyang exactly 4 weeks after Admiral Taemin's capture. 2,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They hung in space above the green and blue planet like a dark cloud covering the sun. On the command ship, High Admiral Kor looked at the display screens with satisfaction. New Pyongyang sat below them, peaceful and unaware. Farms covered most of the land. Cities were small and clean. The whole planet looked soft and easy. "Begin the broadcast," Kor ordered. "I want every system in the Empire watching this." Across 400 star systems, billions of beings stopped what they were doing. On every world controlled by the Vraxians, screens lit up with the same image. The massive fleet, the helpless human colony below. Kor opened a communication channel to the planet. "New Pyongyang, this is High Admiral Kor of the Vraxian Empire. You have 30 minutes to surrender completely. All military personnel must disarm. All government officials must submit to imperial authority. If you refuse, we will destroy your cities from orbit until you comply." In the capital city of New Pyongyang, Governor Minho received the message. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and a face lined by years of farming under an alien sun. But before he was a governor, he had been a colonel in Earth's defense fleet. Minho looked at his staff. They all had the same look in their eyes. Fear, yes, but also something else. Determination. They had all known this might come. "Send the reply," Minho said quietly. Across the planet, 400 million people received the same message simultaneously. Protocol Omega was active. Every adult knew what that meant. They had drilled for this scenario every year since the colony was founded. They had hoped it would never come. Now it had. Minho pressed the button to respond to the Vraxian fleet. "High Admiral Kor, this is Governor Minho of New Pyongyang. We decline your terms." There was silence from the fleet for a moment. Then Kor's voice came back, confused. "You decline? Perhaps you misunderstand. We have 2,000 warships. You have 3 defense platforms and 1 frigate. This is not a negotiation." "We understand perfectly," Minho replied. His voice was calm and steady. "You attacked a human diplomatic vessel. You captured an admiral during a peaceful mission. You have declared war on humanity. We know what comes next." "We are ready." "Ready?" Kor almost laughed. "Ready for what?" "You cannot possibly resist when we're not trying to win," Minho said. "We're buying time." The communication cut off. On New Pyongyang, alarms began to sound in every city, every town, every farm. But these were not panic alarms. They were activation signals. The transformation began. In the capital city, buildings started to move. Outer walls slid away to reveal reinforced military structures underneath. Civilian apartments retracted into the ground. In their place, weapons batteries rose up, their targeting systems coming online. Across the farmlands, entire fields split open. Hidden beneath the crops were missile silos, artillery positions, and shield generators. The peaceful agricultural world was revealing its true nature. The planet's 3 defense platforms suddenly weren't 3 anymore. 20 more platforms uncloaked, their weapons charging. They had been there all along, hidden by stealth technology, waiting for this exact moment. On the Vraxian command ship, the sensors officer shouted in alarm. "Sir, multiple contacts. The planet is armed. There are weapons everywhere." Kor stared at his displays in shock. The peaceful farming colony had just turned into a fortress. How did our intelligence miss this? But there was no time for answers. New Pyongyang's defenders opened fire. The battle lasted 6 hours. The human defenders fought with desperate courage. Every missile counted. Every shot was aimed with precision. The defense platforms formed a network, covering each other's weak points. The ground batteries targeted any Vraxian ship that tried to get close enough for orbital bombardment. The Vraxians lost 300 ships in the first hour. Kor was furious and shocked. This was supposed to be easy. This was supposed to be a demonstration of power, broadcast across the Empire. Instead, they were in a real fight. "Bring in all ships," Kor ordered. "Overwhelming force. Crush them." The full weight of 2,000 warships focused on New Pyongyang. One by one, the defense platforms were destroyed. The shield generators overloaded. The missile silos ran empty. The weapons batteries were reduced to rubble by concentrated fire from orbit. The human frigate, the last military vessel, made a final, desperate charge at the Vraxian command ship. It destroyed 2 escorts before being blown apart by focused fire. The debris burned in the atmosphere as it fell. In the capital city, Governor Minho watched the displays in the command bunker. All defenses were down. The fleet was gone. The orbital space around New Pyongyang belonged to the Vraxians now. "Sir," his communication officer said quietly, "they're demanding surrender again." Minho looked around at his staff. They were all that remained of the military command. Outside this bunker, 400 million civilians waited in shelters, hoping to survive what came next. "Send one final message," Minho said. "To Earth. Tell them Protocol Omega is complete. Tell them we held for 6 hours. Tell them—" He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "Tell them we're sorry we couldn't hold longer." The communication officer worked quickly. The message was compressed, encrypted, and fired off into space through a hidden transmitter, just seconds before Vraxian jammers could block it. Then Minho opened the channel to the Vraxian fleet. "This is Governor Minho, we surrender. Please spare the civilians." High Admiral Kor's face appeared on the screen. He looked angry. "You cost me 300 ships. You embarrassed the Empire in front of billions of viewers. Your civilians will be enslaved. Your world will serve as a warning to others." The communication cut off. Vraxian troops began landing in every city. But High Admiral Kor did not know that his troubles were just beginning. That compressed, encrypted message was already racing through space toward Earth. And on that message were just 3 words that would change everything. They drew first blood. In his prison cell, far away, Admiral Taman felt something. He could not explain it, but somehow he knew. New Pyongyang had fallen. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer for 400 million souls, and then he waited for the storm. The prison levels were deep inside the Vraxian command station. The air was cold and smelled like metal and fear. Guards threw Taman into a cell and locked the heavy door behind him. The sound echoed through the corridor. Taman stood still for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light. The cell was large enough for about 20 people. Shapes moved in the shadows. Other prisoners were already here. "Admiral?" A voice came from the corner. It was female and spoke in perfect Korean. "Admiral Taman? Is that really you?" A young woman stepped into the light. She had short black hair and wore the torn remains of a science officer's uniform. Her face was thin from poor food, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. "Yuna?" Taman recognized her immediately. "Dr. Yuna? We thought you were lost 3 months ago." "The Vraxians captured my research vessel," Yuna explained quickly. She moved closer, keeping her voice low. "Admiral, they don't know. They intercepted our communications, but they couldn't break the military encryption. They have no idea what Earth really is." Another person approached from the shadows. This one was a young man with engineer's marks on his torn uniform. "Admiral, sir, I'm Jiho. They captured me during a raid on the outer stations." He looked around nervously. "Sir, the Vraxians think our 12 colonies are everything. They measured our total population at 14 billion people. They don't understand about the homeworld." Taman felt something like relief, though he kept it from his face. "How many now?" "Earth just passed 39 billion, sir," Yuna whispered. "The Mars colonies have another 8 billion. The industrial belt around Jupiter has 12 billion more. The Vraxians have no idea. They scanned our ships and bases," Jiho added, "but they only counted active military forces. They saw our defensive posture and thought we were weak. They don't understand that we've been at peace for 50 years. Taman sat down slowly on a metal bench. His body was tired, but his mind was working. "Tell me everything they know about us." For the next hour, Yuna and Jiho explained what the Vraxians had learned. It was not much. The Empire's intelligence officers had studied human biology and found nothing special. Average lifespan. No natural weapons or armor. Slower than many other species. Standard mammalian weaknesses. They had studied human technology and found it adequate but not impressive. Human ships were fast but lightly armed compared to Vraxian vessels. Human weapons worked well enough but seemed designed for defense rather than conquest. They had studied human territory and found it small. 12 colonies spread across 8 star systems. No massive fleets patrolling the borders. No aggressive expansion. No threatening behavior toward neighbors. "They think we're rabbits," Jiho said quietly. "Soft prey animals playing at being civilized." Taman closed his eyes. "They don't know about the yards." "No, sir," Yuna confirmed. "The orbital shipyards have been silent for 50 years. To their scans, they just look like old industrial stations, empty monuments to past conflicts, and the reserves? All the veterans who went back to civilian life? The Varaxians scanned them as farmers, teachers, shopkeepers. They have no idea that every human over 30 has military training, that every colony has hidden defenses, that every peaceful settlement is actually a fortress that just hasn't been activated. Meanwhile, far above in the intelligence division, Commander Vex was reviewing the human data again. Something bothered him, but he could not identify what. The numbers all made sense. The humans were weak. Their territory was small. Their military seemed barely adequate for self-defense, but still, something felt wrong. Vex pulled up the recording of Admiral Taman's words in the council chamber. "You want war? We will give you war." He played it again, and again. The human's voice had been so calm, so certain. Not the desperation of a defeated enemy, not the bluster of someone trying to sound tough, just a simple statement of fact, delivered without emotion. Vex called up more data. He looked at human military history. There were gaps in the records. 50 years ago there had been a conflict. Something about machines, artificial intelligence that had rebelled. The records showed that humanity had won, but the details were classified or corrupted. After that war, human military activity had decreased dramatically. Their fleets had shrunk. Their territory had stopped expanding. They had turned inward, focusing on peace and development. To most analysts, this looked like a species that had been exhausted by war, a civilization that had learned its limits and accepted them. But to Vex, who had studied many species before they were conquered, something felt different. This did not look like exhaustion. It looked like choice. "Commander," one of his analysts called out, "Emperor Thulos wants preliminary invasion plans within 3 days. He wants to broadcast the attack on the human colonies as entertainment for the Empire." "Which colony should we target first?" Vex asked. "New Pyongyang, sir. It's their primary agricultural world. Population about 400 million. Light defenses. Perfect for a demonstration of imperial power." Vex looked at the data on New Pyongyang. It seemed accurate. The planet had 3 defense platforms, 1 small frigate and minimal ground forces. The invasion would be quick and easy. So why did he feel uneasy? Back in the prison cell, Taemin was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "When the Vraxians attack New Pyongyang, the colony will activate its protocols. They will fight back." "They can't win, sir," Jiho said softly. "The Vraxians will bring thousands of ships." "I know," Taemin replied. His voice was heavy with sadness. "New Pyongyang will fall. 400 million people will die or be enslaved. It will be a massacre." Yuna looked shocked. "Then why did you provoke them? Why did you give them that warning?" The old admiral looked at her with ancient eyes. "Because they needed to draw first blood. They needed to be the ones who escalated this into a real war. When New Pyongyang falls, when our people die, Earth will have justification. The restraints will come off. The yards will wake up. And then," he paused, "then they will understand what they have done." In the darkness of the cell, the 3 humans sat in silence. They were prisoners of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. But somehow they did not feel defeated. They felt like a storm was coming. The small human ship drifted through space like a wounded bird. Its engines were dead. Its hull showed burn marks from weapon fire. Inside the ship, an old man sat calmly in the pilot's chair, waiting. The Vraxian warships surrounded the tiny vessel. There were 12 of them, each one massive and covered in weapons. Their dark metal hulls reflected no light. They looked like predators circling prey. Admiral Taemin watched the warships through his cracked viewscreen. His gray hair was neat despite the battle. His uniform, though worn and old, still carried the symbols of Earth's defense fleet. He was 73 years old. His hands were steady. His eyes were calm. The lead Vraxian ship sent a message. The voice was harsh and full of clicking sounds. "Human vessel, you are captured. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in your destruction." Taemin pressed a button. "I am Admiral Taemin of the Human Defense Fleet. I was on a diplomatic mission. Your attack violates—" The Vraxian cut him off with a sound like laughter. "Diplomatic mission? You were spying in our territory. Your protests mean nothing." The boarding party came through his airlock 10 minutes later. They were tall, covered in green and brown scales, with yellow eyes that looked at him like he was an insect. The leader grabbed Taemin roughly by the arm. "This is the human? This old thing?" The Vraxian soldier sounded disappointed. "I expected something more dangerous." They dragged him to their command ship. The journey took 3 hours through cold metal corridors. Vraxian soldiers laughed and pointed at him as he passed. Some made jokes about how soft and weak he looked. Finally, they brought him to a massive chamber. It was the Grand Council room of the Vraxian Empire. The ceiling stretched up so high that Taman could barely see it. Seats rose in circles around a central platform, and on those seats sat hundreds of beings from dozens of different species. But they were not free people. Taman could see it in their eyes. These were conquered races forced to serve the Empire. Some looked like birds. Others had fur or strange skin. All of them looked tired and afraid. At the highest seat sat Emperor Thulos himself. He was enormous even for a Vraxian. His scales were deep red instead of green. Golden armor covered his chest, his eyes fixed on Taman with cold amusement. "Bring the human forward," Thulos commanded. The guards pushed Taman onto the central platform. Chains hung from his wrists and ankles. Bright lights shone down on him from all directions. The entire council could see him clearly. Thulos leaned forward. "So this is humanity. I have heard stories about your species. You claim to be civilized. You claim to deserve respect." He paused, and a sound like cruel laughter came from his throat. "But look at you, old, weak, no claws, no armor, no natural weapons at all. Your skin looks like it would tear from a gentle scratch." The council chamber filled with laughter. It came from all sides, echoing off the walls. Vraxian nobles clicked their jaws in amusement. Other species, too afraid not to join in, added their own sounds. "Tell me, human," Thulos continued, "how many worlds does your species control?" 12 colonies across 8 systems, Taman answered. His voice was quiet but clear. This brought fresh waves of laughter. 12. Thulos stood up, spreading his arms wide. "The Vraxian Empire controls 400 systems. We have conquered 47 species. We command fleets of 50,000 warships. And you dare to send a diplomatic mission to us? You dare to speak as if you are our equals?" Taman said nothing. He stood straight despite his chains. "Your species is nothing," a Vraxian general called out from the seats. "You breed slowly like all mammals. You have no natural defenses. You occupy only a tiny corner of space. Why should we not simply take what little you have?" "We came in peace," Taman said. "We offered friendship and trade, peace." Thulos laughed again. "Peace is what the strong grant to the weak. It is not something equals share. And you, human, are far beneath us." He turned to address the full council. "I declare that in 1 month I will personally lead our fleets to human space. We will show the galaxy what happens to insignificant species who pretend to matter. The invasion will be broadcast across all our worlds. Everyone will watch humanity's pathetic colonies fall." The council cheered. The sound was deafening. Thulos looked back at Taman. "Do you have any final words, old human, before we throw you in our prisons?" Taman looked up at the Emperor. For the first time, something changed in his expression. His eyes grew hard. His jaw set. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but somehow it carried through the entire chamber. "You want war? We will give you war." The chamber went silent for just a moment. Then the laughter started again, louder than before. But some of the conquered species in the council did not laugh. They had seen that look before. They recognized it from their own warriors in the moments before desperate last stands. A few of them felt something cold touch their hearts. The guards dragged Taman away to the prison levels. Behind him, the Empire celebrated its upcoming victory. The message from New Pyongyang reached Earth 17 hours after the colony fell. It arrived at the Global Defense Council headquarters in Seoul Prime, the massive city that served as humanity's capital. Fleet Admiral Heejin sat in the council chamber and read the report 3 times. She was 58 years old. Her black hair had streaks of gray. Her uniform held medals from conflicts most people had forgotten. She had hoped never to see war again. Around the long table sat the other council members. Chancellor Do-hyun, the civilian leader of Earth's government. General Junho, commander of ground forces. Admiral Sumi, in charge of fleet logistics, and 6 others, each representing different branches of humanity's defense structure. 400 million dead, Hyejin said quietly. The room was silent. They killed them or enslaved them. They broadcast it as entertainment across their empire. Chancellor Do-hyun's hands were shaking. He was a kind man who had spent 20 years working for peace. "Is there any chance this is wrong? Any possibility that New Pyongyang survived?" "No, sir," Admiral Sumi replied. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were hard as stone. We have confirmation from 3 independent sources. The colony is under Vraxian control. Governor Minho and his entire staff are dead. The civilian population has been enslaved. They gave no warning, General Junho said. They just attacked. A farming colony, families, children. The room fell silent again. Everyone knew what had to come next. But saying it out loud made it real. Made it irreversible. Finally, Chancellor Dohyun asked the question, "Do we wake them?" Admiral Heejin stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Sol Prime stretched for hundreds of kilometers. 50 million people lived in this one city. Humanity had built a beautiful civilization during the 50 years of peace. Art, science, culture. They had put away their weapons and tried to be better. Protocol Omega has been invoked, Heejin said. The Vraxians attacked first. They killed our people after we showed restraint, after we gave them every chance to walk away. After Admiral Taman warned them, she turned back to face the council. We have no choice. We wake them. The vote was unanimous. Admiral Hyejin walked to a secure terminal and entered a code that only she and 2 other people knew. The screen prompted for confirmation. She pressed her thumb to the scanner. Then she spoke clearly. This is Fleet Admiral Heejin. Authorization code Alpha 77 Omega. Activate all shipyards. Begin full military production. Recall all reserves. Wake the fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then across human space, everything changed. In orbit around Earth, 40 massive structures began to power up. They were shaped like enormous rings, each one the size of a small moon. For 50 years, they had been dark and silent. Now lights flickered to life across their surfaces. Engines hummed. Construction bays opened like the mouths of vast metal beasts. These were the shipyards. Humanity had built them during the last war. The conflict with rogue artificial intelligence that had nearly destroyed everything. After that war ended, humans had won, but at terrible cost. They had decided to pursue peace. But they had not dismantled the yards. They had just turned them off. Now they were awake. On Luna, Mars, in the asteroid belt and around the gas giants, more shipyards activated. 60 in total across the solar system. Each one capable of producing 100 warships per day when running at full capacity. Admiral Sumi pulled up production schedules on her display. At current capacity, we can produce 6,000 ships per day. If we push to maximum production, maybe 10,000 per day. But that will take 3 weeks to ramp up. Do it, Heejin ordered. Whatever it takes. But the shipyards were only the beginning. Across Earth and all her colonies, 10 billion people received messages on their personal devices. Messages that they had hoped never to see. Captain Keong was teaching history at a university when his message arrived. He was 35 years old. His students liked him because he made ancient wars seem interesting. They had no idea that he was a decorated combat pilot who had flown 93 missions during the AI conflict. The message was simple. Protocol Omega activated. Report to Earth Defense Station 7 within 24 hours. Bring your gear. Keong looked at the message for a long moment. Around him, his students were chatting about their upcoming exams. They had no idea that everything was about to change. He dismissed the class early and went home. In his closet, behind his civilian clothes, was a sealed case. He had not opened it in 15 years. Inside was his flight suit, his helmet, his service weapon, all perfectly maintained just in case. Across Earth, 10 million veterans were doing the same thing. On Mars, another 3 million. In the colonies, 5 million more. Farmers putting away their tools, teachers closing their classrooms, shopkeepers locking their doors, artists setting down their brushes. All of them had been soldiers once. All of them had put away their weapons and tried to build something better. Now they were being called back. Bora was a doctor at a children's hospital when she got her message. She had been a combat medic in the war. She had saved hundreds of lives on desperate battlefields. She had retired and spent 20 years healing sick kids instead of wounded soldiers. She stood in the children's ward, looking at the small patients who depended on her. Then she looked at the message again. Protocol Omega meant civilians were dying. Somewhere out there, human children were being enslaved or killed. She called for her replacement and went to pack her medical gear. On Earth Defense Station 7, Captain Keong reported for duty. The station was transforming around him. Civilian areas were being converted to military functions. Cargo bays were being filled with weapons and ammunition. Docking ports that had handled tourist shuttles for decades now prepared for warships. His commanding officer was Admiral Hana, a woman he had served under during the AI War. She looked older now, but her eyes were just as sharp. "Captain Kyung," she said. "Good to see you again. I wish it was under better circumstances." "Ma'am," Kyung responded. "What's our assignment?" "You'll be commanding Fighter Wing 7. We're attaching you to the strike carrier Indomitable. We launch in 5 days. Kyung felt something cold in his stomach. 5 days, that was fast. "How bad is it?" Admiral Hana's face darkened. "New Pyongyang is gone. 400 million people. The Vraxians killed or enslaved every single one. They broadcast it as entertainment. Around them, other veterans were arriving. Some looked excited to be back in uniform. Others looked sad. Many looked simply determined. These were not young soldiers eager for glory. These were people who knew the cost of war and were willing to pay it anyway." In the council chamber, Admiral Heejin was coordinating with the shipyards. The first new vessels were already under construction. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and battleships. Every design that had proven effective in the last war was being built again. "How long until we can field a fleet?" Chancellor Do-hyun asked. "The yards had materials stockpiled," Admiral Sumi reported. "We can have 10,000 ships ready in 3 weeks. Another 10,000 in 6 weeks. After that, production depends on how fast we can mine and process raw materials." "And the Vraxians?" "Intelligence estimates they have 50,000 warships total. But they're spread across 400 systems. They can't concentrate all of them without leaving their territory vulnerable." Heejin studied the star maps. "They'll come at us with everything they can spare. Probably 30,000 ships, maybe more. Can we win?" Do-hyun asked quietly. The admiral looked at him. "Sir, we built these yards to fight machines that thought faster than we did, that never got tired, that felt no fear. We won that war. The Vraxians are just organic beings with ships and weapons. We can beat them. At what cost? Whatever it takes," Heejin said. "They killed our people. They need to understand that humanity doesn't start wars, but we finish them." Above Earth, the first new warship rolled out of the yards. It was a destroyer, sleek and deadly. More would follow. Thousands more. An entire fleet born from humanity's anger and grief. The storm was gathering. Soon it would break upon the Vraxian Empire like nothing they had ever seen. 3 weeks had passed since New Pyongyang fell. The Vraxian Empire was celebrating. Emperor Thulos had personally overseen the enslavement of 400 million humans. He broadcast speeches about Vraxian superiority. He promised more conquests to come. The Empire's military was confident. A Vraxian patrol fleet of 200 ships was sent to scout deeper into human territory. Their orders were to find more weak colonies and claim them before the main invasion force arrived. The patrol fleet was commanded by Admiral Rax, a veteran of 12 conquests. He expected to find scattered human refugees fleeing in whatever ships they could find. He expected fear and chaos. He expected easy victories. Instead, when his fleet arrived at the border of human space, he found the human defense fleet waiting. At first, Rax thought his sensors were malfunctioning. The numbers could not be right. But as his ships confirmed the readings, the truth became clear. 10,000 human warships hung in perfect formation. They were arranged in a pattern so precise it looked like a work of art. Every ship was in exactly the right position. Every weapon system was aligned. Every crew was ready. Admiral Rax had seen many fleets in his career, but he had never seen anything like this. The human ships were different from their old scouts and frigates. These were purpose-built warships, sleek, dangerous, new. At the center of the formation was a ship that made even Rax's blood run cold. It was 12 kilometers long, shaped like a wedge of dark metal. Weapons studded its hull like scales on a dragon. It radiated power. "That's their flagship," Rax's tactical officer whispered. "The HDFS Indomitable." Before Rax could give orders, every screen in his fleet lit up with the same image. A human woman in an admiral's uniform. She was middle-aged with gray-streaked hair and eyes like ice. "I am Fleet Admiral Heejin of the Human Defense Fleet," she said. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of absolute authority. "You are in human territory. You represent an empire that attacked our people without provocation, that killed 400 million civilians, that mocked our attempts at peace." Rax tried to open a channel to respond, but Heejin continued speaking. "You thought our restraint was weakness. You thought our peace was fear. You were wrong. We gave you peace because we chose to. We held back our strength because we hoped for better. You destroyed that hope. You killed our people. You wanted to see humanity's power. Now you will. The human fleet did not wait for surrender. They attacked. The battle lasted 11 minutes. That was all. 11 minutes for 10,000 human warships to destroy 200 Vraxian ships. The humans fought with a precision that seemed impossible. Every shot found its target. Every maneuver was flawless. The Vraxian ships tried to fight back, but it was like fighting a storm. Overwhelming and unstoppable. Admiral Rax's flagship was hit by weapons fire that pierced through his shields like they were made of paper. His last thought before the ship exploded was that the humans had been holding back all along. Humanity had never shown its true weapons until now. When the battle ended, there were no Vraxian survivors. 200 ships were reduced to debris floating in space. The human fleet remained in perfect formation, not a single ship lost. The message was clear. Humanity was done holding back. On the Vraxian homeworld, Emperor Thulos received the report in stunned silence. All of them? Every ship? Yes, Emperor, Commander Vex replied. His voice shook. The battle recordings show that the humans have technology far beyond what we estimated. Their weapons, their shields, their coordination. Everything we thought we knew was wrong. How many ships do they have? Current estimates are 10,000, Emperor, but... Vex hesitated. But our sensors detected massive industrial activity around their homeworld. They appear to be building more ships. Many more. Thulos stood up from his throne. How many more? We don't know, Emperor. The production rate appears to be thousands of ships per day. At that rate, they could match our entire fleet strength in weeks. The Emperor's advisors began to panic. Questions filled the throne room. How could the humans build so fast? Where did their technology come from? Why had they seemed so weak before? Commander Vex had been studying the data for days. He had finally found the answer in the fragments of human history they had collected. Emperor, 50 years ago, humanity fought a war against artificial intelligence. Machines that had rebelled against their creators. The humans won, but it nearly destroyed them. So they are weak from that war, one advisor said hopefully. No, Vex replied. They built their entire military infrastructure to fight that war. Shipyards capable of producing thousands of vessels per day, training programs that turned every citizen into a potential soldier, weapons designed to fight enemies that were faster and smarter than any organic being. He pulled up images of the human shipyards, massive structures orbiting Earth. After they won, they turned off these yards. They demobilized their military. They pursued peace. We thought they were weak because we saw them at peace. But they weren't weak. They were just resting. We woke them up, another advisor whispered. Emperor Thulos slammed his fist on his throne. We are the Vraxian Empire. We control 400 star systems. We have 50,000 warships. We will mobilize every fleet and crush these humans before they can build more ships. Across the Empire, orders went out. 200 fleets, each with 200 to 300 ships, were recalled from their patrol zones. The Vraxians were gathering their full strength. 30,000 warships would strike at humanity's homeworld. But even as the Empire mobilized, something was happening in human space that the Vraxians did not understand. On Earth, the shipyards were working at full capacity. 4,000 new warships rolled out every single day. Veterans from across human space were manning these vessels. Every captain knew their job. Every crew had trained together for years during peacetime drills that had seemed pointless then, but proved essential now. Captain Kyung stood on the bridge of his carrier, the Indomitable. His fighter wing was ready. His pilots were veterans like him, people who had fought intelligent machines and survived. Fighting organic aliens would be easier by comparison. Captain, his second officer, said, we just received word from Fleet Command. The Vraxians are mobilizing their full strength. 30,000 ships heading this way. Kyung looked at the tactical display. The human fleet had grown to 14,000 ships now, with more arriving every day. They were still outnumbered, but numbers were not everything. Send a message to all fighter wings, Kyung ordered. Tell them to prepare for the largest battle in human history. Tell them to remember New Pyongyang. Tell them that we're going to make the Vraxians regret ever hearing the name humanity. Around Earth, the fleet gathered, 14,000 ships and growing, each one crewed by people who had lost friends or family on New Pyongyang. each one armed with weapons that had been designed to fight an enemy far more dangerous than the Varaxians. Fleet Admiral Hyejin stood in the command center, watching the formations take shape. Chancellor Doyun stood beside her. "Can we win?" he asked again. Hyejin smiled grimly. "Sir, we built this fleet to fight gods made of code and lightning. The Varaxians are just aliens with ships. We'll win." The storm was ready, and it was about to break. The Battle of Sol began when 30,000 Varaxian warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of humanity's home system. It was the largest fleet the Empire had ever assembled. Emperor Thulos commanded from his personal flagship, determined to crush humanity once and for all. What they found waiting for them was beyond their worst fears. 20,000 human warships stood in defensive formations around Earth and her colonies. The shipyards were still producing more vessels, and fresh ships were joining the fleet every hour. But it was not just the numbers that shocked the Varaxians. It was the discipline, the coordination, the absolute confidence radiating from every human vessel. "All ships, this is Emperor Thulos," the Varaxian leader broadcast. "Surrender immediately and your deaths will be swift. Resist and we will make your species extinct." Fleet Admiral Hyejin's response was simple. "You killed 400 million of our people. You wanted war. Here it is." The human fleet opened fire first. Thousands of missiles streaked across the void. Energy weapons lanced out with perfect accuracy. The Varaxian advance ships were hit before they could react. The battle became chaos, but it was controlled chaos for the humans and deadly confusion for the Varaxians. Captain Kyung led his fighter wing from the carrier Indomitable. 300 small craft launched from the massive ship, each one piloted by a veteran who had flown against AI opponents. The enemy missiles and point defense systems that would have destroyed normal pilots were navigated with practiced ease. "Target their command ships," Kyung ordered. "Break their coordination." His wing dove into the Varaxian formation like sharks among fish. Varaxian fighters tried to intercept, but they were too slow. Human pilots had trained against opponents that could calculate firing solutions in microseconds. Fighting organic pilots was almost easy by comparison. On the Indomitable's bridge, Commander Bora coordinated the medical teams. She had been a combat medic in the AI War. Now she commanded all medical operations for the flagship. Wounded crew members were treated with efficiency born from years of experience. "Damage report from Section 7. An officer called out. "Hull breach, 12 casualties. Medical Team 4 respond," Bora ordered calmly. She had seen worse. She had treated worse. This was terrible, but she had the training to handle it. The battle raged for 3 days. Not 3 hours. 3 days of continuous combat in the space around Earth. The Varaxians had numbers. They had powerful weapons. They had courage. But they were fighting an enemy that had been forged in a war against an opponent far more dangerous than they could imagine. Human ships moved in coordinated groups, covering each other's weaknesses. When Varaxian vessels concentrated fire, human ships dispersed and regrouped elsewhere. When the Varaxians tried to maneuver, humans anticipated and countered. Emperor Thulos watched his fleet being systematically destroyed. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "They're outnumbered." Commander Vex, still aboard the Emperor's flagship, finally understood. "Emperor, they're not just soldiers. Every single human in that fleet has been training for this their entire adult lives. Their entire civilization is structured around defense. Every citizen is a warrior. Every worker is a soldier in reserve." On the second day, the Varaxian fleet was reduced to 20,000 ships. The humans had lost 3,000. The math was terrible for the Empire. "Emperor," his fleet commander reported, "we should retreat and regroup." "No," Thulos roared. "We are the Varaxian Empire. We do not retreat." But pride could not change reality. By the third day, the Varaxian fleet was shattered. 15,000 ships destroyed. The survivors were scattered and disorganized. Emperor Thulos finally gave the order to retreat. What remained of his fleet fled the Sol system, jumping to faster-than-light speed in a desperate escape. Fleet Admiral Hyejin did not pursue. She had made her point. Earth was defended. The Varaxian Empire had learned that humanity could not be easily conquered, but the war was not over. Across the galaxy, human fleets began their own offensive. They did not attack randomly. They did not seek revenge through mindless destruction. They moved with purpose and precision. Admiral Hana led the Liberation Fleet. Her orders were clear: Free the conquered species. Destroy military targets. Spare civilians. Show the galaxy that humanity fought for justice, not conquest. The first target was the prison station where Admiral Tae Min was held. 3 human battleships and 12 destroyers struck fast and hard. The Vraxian guards never had a chance to respond. Captain Kyung personally led the boarding team. They moved through the station's corridors with practiced efficiency. When they found resistance, they handled it quickly. When they found prisoners, they offered help. In the deep prison levels, Kyung found his grandfather. Admiral Taemin had lost weight, but his eyes were still sharp. Yuna and Jiho were with him, along with hundreds of other human prisoners and thousands more from other species. "Grandfather," Kyung said, his voice breaking. "We came for you." Taemin embraced his grandson. "I knew you would." "How many did we lose?" "New Pyongyang fell, as you predicted. 400 million, but we've freed 2 other colonies. We've destroyed half the Vraxian fleet. We're winning." The old admiral closed his eyes briefly, mourning the dead. Then he opened them again, sharp and focused. "Then let's finish this." Over the next 3 months, the human fleets moved through Vraxian space like a precision instrument. World after world was liberated. Species that had been enslaved for generations suddenly found themselves free. The humans did not claim these worlds. They did not establish colonies or demand tribute. They simply freed the people and moved on. This confused many species. They had only known conquest and domination. The idea of liberation without expectation of reward was strange to them. On the freed world of Talax, the bird-like Talaxians asked the human commander, Admiral Sumi, why humanity was helping them. "Because it's the right thing to do," Sumi replied simply. "The Vraxians enslaved you." "That was wrong. We're making it right. But what do you want from us?" "Nothing, be free. Build your own future. If you want to trade with us someday, we'd be happy to. If you want to be our allies, that's wonderful. If you just want to be left alone, that's fine too. The choice is yours." The Talaxians had never heard such words before. Neither had the dozens of other species the humans freed. Word spread through the galaxy. Humanity was not like the Vraxian Empire. They did not conquer. They did not enslave. They fought to protect and to free. Species that had been conquered by the Vraxians began to rebel. Entire worlds rose up against their oppressors, knowing that humanity would support them. The empire began to collapse from within. Emperor Thulos watched his civilization crumbling. In 6 months, humanity had destroyed his fleets, freed his slaves, and turned his empire into ruins. "How did this happen?" he asked Commander Vex one last time. Vex looked at him with tired eyes. "We attacked an old man. We mocked him. We ignored his warning. We killed 400 million of his people. And then we learned that humanity doesn't start fights, but they finish them." The Vraxian homeworld was the last to fall. Human fleets surrounded it, but they did not attack the civilian population. They only targeted military installations. When the fighting stopped, Admiral Heejin herself came down to accept the surrender. Emperor Thulos was brought before her in chains, just as Admiral Taemin had been brought before him months ago. But unlike Thulos, Heejin showed no cruelty. No mockery, only cold justice. "You wanted to see humanity's strength," she said. "Are you satisfied?" The war ended 6 months after it began. The Vraxian Empire, which had ruled 400 star systems for 2 centuries, no longer existed. In its place stood 47 freed species, each trying to understand what came next. On Earth, in the great assembly hall of Sol Prime, representatives from all these species gathered. They came in ships. They came in hope. They came in fear. None of them knew what humanity would demand now that the fighting was done. Chancellor Do-hyun stood before them. He was older now, worn by the stress of war, but his voice was kind as he addressed the assembled beings. 6 months ago, the Vraxian Empire attacked a human colony. They killed 400 million of our people. They forced us into a war we did not want. Today that empire is gone. Today you are all free. The hall was silent. Beings from dozens of species waited to hear humanity's terms. What tribute would be demanded? What new masters would replace the old? "Humanity seeks no tribute from you," Do-hyun continued. "We claim no new territory. We demand no loyalty or service. You are free to govern yourselves as you see fit. You may join together in a new coalition if you wish. You may remain independent. You may even choose to have nothing to do with humanity. The choice is yours." A Talaxian representative stood up, her feathers ruffling with confusion. But you won the war. You have the right of conquest. Why do you give it away? Do-hyun smiled sadly. Because conquest was never our goal. Freedom was. Justice was. Peace was. We did not fight to build an empire. We fought to destroy one. Another representative, a reptilian being from a world called Nexus, spoke up. What if we wish to join with humanity? To form an alliance? Then we welcome you as equals, Do-hyun replied. Not as subjects. Not as servants. As partners who choose freely to work together. Over the following weeks, the freed species made their choices. 23 of them chose to form the Galactic Coalition, with humanity as founding members but not leaders. Each species had an equal vote. Each voice carried the same weight. 15 species chose independence, wanting to rebuild their civilizations without outside involvement. Humanity respected that choice and offered trade agreements and mutual defense pacts without pressure. 7 species were too damaged by centuries of slavery to decide immediately. Humanity offered aid, food, medical supplies, and engineers to help rebuild. No strings attached. No demands made. 2 species asked if they could establish colonies in human space, seeking the protection of humanity's fleets. The request was granted, and they settled on empty worlds and systems near Earth. The galaxy was healing, slowly, painfully, but healing. On Earth, the veterans were returning home. The massive fleets were being stood down. The shipyards were being converted back to peaceful industrial production. Humanity was putting away its weapons again, hoping that this time they would stay put away longer. Captain Kyung returned to his university to teach history. But now his students knew that his stories of ancient wars were not just stories. He had lived through the latest one. When they asked him about the war, he spoke carefully, trying to help them understand both the cost and the necessity. War is terrible, he told them. It should always be the last choice. But sometimes evil forces you to fight. When that happens, you must be ready. You must be strong. And when you win, you must be merciful. Dr. Bora returned to her children's hospital. The young patients were happy to see her back. She did not speak much about what she had seen and done during the war. Instead, she focused on healing the children who needed her. That felt like a better way to honor the dead. Admiral Hana retired from active service. She had spent 40 years in the military. She had fought in 2 wars and hoped there would never be a third. She moved to a quiet farm on Mars and tried to learn how to grow vegetables. It was harder than commanding a fleet, but more peaceful. Fleet Admiral Hyejin remained in service. Someone had to ensure that humanity stayed ready, that the lessons learned were not forgotten. She oversaw the reduction of the fleets and the preservation of the shipyards. Never again would humanity be caught unprepared. But the most important reunion happened on Earth. In a small house on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Taemin, freed from the Vraxian prison, had chosen to fully retire. He was 74 years old now. He had served humanity for 53 years. He was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. His family gathered around him. His son, his daughter, his grandchildren, including Captain Kyung. His great-grandchildren who were too young to remember the war. Grandfather, Kyung asked one evening as they sat watching the sunset, do you regret it? Provoking the Vraxians? Knowing that New Pyongyang would fall? Taemin was quiet for a long time. Every day, 400 million people died because of the choice I made. Their blood is on my hands. But if you hadn't made that choice, the Vraxians would have attacked anyway. They would have been prepared. We would have been surprised. More would have died, perhaps. The old admiral watched the sun sink into the ocean. Or perhaps we could have found another way. I will never know. That is the burden of command. You make the best choice you can with the information you have, and you live with the consequences. They're calling you a hero, the man who saved humanity. Heroes don't let 400 million people die, Kyung. I did what I thought was necessary. Whether it was right or not, history will judge. Far away on the ruins of the Vraxian homeworld, Emperor Thulos lived in a comfortable prison. It was not cruel. Humanity did not believe in torture or revenge. But he would never be free again. Sometimes late at night he thought about that old human standing before him in chains. The warning he had dismissed with laughter. You want war? We will give you war. Thulos finally understood. Humanity had not wanted war. They had wanted peace. But when forced to fight, they had fought with the totality of a species that understood the cost of failure. The galaxy had learned a lesson. Some species were powerful because they conquered. Some were dangerous because they were aggressive. But humanity was different. They were dangerous because they valued peace so highly that they were willing to fight with absolute determination to preserve it. Years passed. The Galactic Coalition grew stronger. Trade flourished. Culture was exchanged. Art and science advanced through cooperation between species. The memory of the Vraxian Empire faded into history, a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance and cruelty. Human children learned about the war in school. They learned about New Pyongyang and the 400 million who died there. They learned about the veterans who came out of retirement to fight. They learned about the species that were freed and the peace that followed. Most importantly, they learned why humanity fought, not for conquest, not for glory, not for revenge, but for justice, for freedom, for the right of all beings to live without fear of slavery and domination. Admiral Taman lived to be 91 years old. When he died peacefully in his sleep surrounded by family, the entire galaxy mourned. Representatives from 47 species attended his funeral. They spoke of the old man who had warned an empire, who had sacrificed a colony to save a civilization, who had shown that peace was worth fighting for. His tombstone was simple. It bore his name, his rank, and one line that summarized his philosophy and humanity's approach to the galaxy. We did not want war, but when it came, we fought to ensure peace would last. And in the decades that followed, that peace did last. The shipyards remained ready but silent. The veterans stayed in reserve but hoped never to be called. Humanity continued to explore, to learn, to grow, and to help others do the same. They had proven that a species could be powerful without being aggressive. That strength could serve peace instead of conquest. That the patient death could also be the patient life, building rather than destroying, healing rather than harming. The galaxy was better for having humanity in it. Not because humans were perfect, but because they tried to be good. Not because they never made mistakes, but because they learned from them. Not because they were the strongest, but because they used their strength wisely. And in quiet moments when the stars shone bright above Earth, people remembered. They remembered New Pyongyang. They remembered the cost of war. They remembered why peace mattered, and they stayed ready just in case. Because the universe was vast and threats might come again. But if they did, humanity would face them the same way they always had, with courage, with determination, and with the hope that this time the warning would be enough. You want war, we will give you war. But they hoped always that the answer would be peace instead.